Thank you for joining us for the Secure Connections podcast, brought to you by IoTSSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. I'm your host, Brian Sherman, and today's episode is Boosting Security and Cash Flow in Your MSP Business. And joining me to share his insight and expertise in this area is Ryan Goodman, President and Partner at Connect Booster. Along with his two business partners, he guides the day-to-day operations of the B&G team family of businesses, which include merchant services, point-of-sale solutions, web development and search engine optimization, software development, and many other business services. Ryan spends the majority of his time overseeing and building Connect Booster. His primary focus is helping MSPs efficiently, securely, and cost-effectively accept client payments and keep their accounts receivable balance in check. Ryan, welcome to the Secure Connections podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Brian. Looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for the invitation.
Happy to have you today. And I know we're going to be talking quite a bit about cash flow and security and MSPs and the things that they need to know. So looking forward to the discussion. So I'd like to start off with a warm-up question that allows our audience to learn a little bit more about our guests. So today I'd like to ask, where were you born? And then tell us about the one thing everyone should know about the city where you spent your formative years.
Oh, wow. Well, that's really interesting. I was born in Hibbing, Minnesota. So I like to say I'm South Canadian. I wasn't too far from the Canadian border. So if you know where the tip of Lake Superior is in Minnesota, I'm north of that, about 50 miles. That's where I grew up. Boy, one of the things about growing up and what to know about the city where I spent my formative years, it was formerly an area where there's the largest iron ore open pit mine in the world when I was growing up. I think there's a couple mines that surpass it now, but a huge gaping open hole in the earth, iron ore mining. And as kids, we would go and cliff jump into the old abandoned mines into the water. So it was a fun place to grow up. But I'm glad I don't live there anymore because I don't want my children doing what I was doing. So
understand, as a Boy Scout and a Boy Scout dad, yeah, we've have daring kids. You've got to be a little bit cautious. So
right.
Excellent. And I know that we have many Canadian members in IoTSSA as well as Americans. So you're kind of spanning both continents for us, which is great.
Correct.
So tell me a little, how did you get involved in payment processing technology? What's the backstory on Ryan Goodman?
Sure. Pretty unique path as I went to school for architecture. That's how I ended up in Fargo, North Dakota, where we're based today. Owned a contracting company. So you think, how does that relate to payments? Well, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit and I love sales, and was involved in a direct sales company right at the end of college. And that was dealing with Dish Network, Singular Wireless. It was called Singular back then. The point to that was it was recurring revenue, right? In those type of sales, there was a monthly service fee that was associated. We could build a residual base, albeit they were really small. And so it was a difficult business to be in. And as we were building a team, I was involved in recruiting other people on my team to be involved in that business, and had run across an individual in that network that had enlightened me to the residual income stream of payment processing. And as we built out the business and we're helping people through price, you see payment processing is really a commodity. It's really hard to differentiate yourself in a commodity business. We started evolving into, well, how do we mesh this with the technology that we see in the marketplace? And so started in payment processing in 2005, incorporated B&G, Connect Booster's parent company, in 2007, and invested in a point of sale technology business in 2010. And so that's where the payments and technology piece came from. Connect Booster as a product was born out of needing to automate or processes of getting paid inside of the technology company. Since we were so used to being paid from electronic payments on a recurring residual basis, we were ill prepared to run the security and technology business around point of sale because it was project-based and we didn't have a good tool set inside of our portfolio to help us get paid on a recurring automated basis, like we did inside of the payment processing business. And so again, Connect Booster was born out of pain. And then, that all ties back into how do we process transactions securely? And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. I'm sure as you have some more questions for me.
Sure. I think the financial aspect is trying to balance from an MSP's perspective and an MSSP's perspective is getting the recurring revenue is great. And having it on the spreadsheet, you see it, we've been billing and billing and billing, but obviously the hard part for many small businesses, not just providers, is collecting that cash. That's not always the easy part, and giving their clients a secure way to do that, because managing it can be difficult. But so based on your experience, how do most MSPs handle their billing and collections processes? What are you seeing as far as those that are coming into Connect Booster before they implement your system?
Sure. Many of the partners that we work with are using their PSA tools or their accounting tools, things like QuickBooks, Xero, to send out their billing. And collections oftentimes is a pretty manual process. One of the things that we found is a lot of our partners have a really good plan inside of their business up until the point they deliver the invoice to their client, and then oftentimes the strategy is hope that they pay, and and then it's a manual process of a check, and so they're waiting for checks to come in. And as we have more and more conversations with partners, we find them using other tool sets for electronic payments. Maybe they're doing ACH, which is an electronic payment that's withdrawing right from a checking account. That's the definition of ACH, or EFT, as our Canadian partners would call it. As they're using those electronic payment methods, whether that's check or credit card, they're not integrated with the tools that they use, like their PSA tool or their accounting tool, or they're partially integrated. So there's some form of automation. Let's say Intuit, QuickBooks payments, as an example, will do some reconciliation as payments come in, but there's no insight into how invoices can fluctuate inside of our businesses when we're offering user-centric type billing where those counts go up and down. And so there are other manual processes that are inadvertently created through trying to implement automation inside of the business. And that's where Connect Booster comes in and is offering really a seamless, fully integrated solution, while also providing the security of holding payment data, not only for our partner, but also for their end client and where they're entering that payment data and how they're getting it to their partner. That's our focus.
So Connect Booster provides a platform where IT service providers, customers can securely pay for their services. What are some of the security issues that MSPs should be concerned with that maybe they aren't as aware of as they should be at this point in time?
Sure. A lot of it comes down to data security, PCI compliance. That's a huge concern. When you have access to payment data, how is that payment data being stored? How is it being utilized once you have that inside of your network or inside of your access? And then who has access, right? So it's one thing to have it and have it being held secure, but then who has access? When you think about payments specifically, there are refunds that need to happen sometimes. Well, there are portions of certain payment systems where, a refund can only be done against a transaction that has been run. But there are also certain security concerns about the availability of doing what's called a blind refund, where you could actually just refund or send money out in reverse, not accept it, but send it out blindly to an account without having a transaction that it's refunding against, as well as people and partners, and a lot of the focus is around electronic fraud and capturing information electronically through a breach. But just the fact of manual fraud, old-fashioned, I've written something down and now I have access to it, and where does that live and how is it disposed of? There's a huge part of the PCI compliance issue that's still dealing with just flat out manual fraud, not electronic fraud. And so, those things we address inside of Connect Booster, but those are a lot of the things that MSPs need to be concerned about when they're dealing with customer payment data.
Well, I know most managed service providers and managed security service providers, their employees are trusted employees, but the people element still comes into play. As you have people come and go and transition in and out of the company, and if you have them collecting, I can see where that could be a major issue if they're writing down credit card numbers coming in or manually trying to enter this information, because for many businesses they change credit cards frequently.
Right.
Banks frequently, right? I mean, how much is involved in that process if you've got 100 clients each year?
Right. I mean, there's churn all the time, and a lot of it's not just because the business itself wants to switch up a credit card or get a new credit card. They're issued new credit cards from the credit card issuer because of fraud somewhere else. You see, even my Connect Booster credit card for business, I think I've had 3 of them this year, without an explanation of why, other than, knowing through tribal knowledge that, they had reason to believe that the number was compromised in some sort of breach, everything that we've been hearing about over the last few years, specifically the last few months, some really big organizations again. And here we go, have a new card number. And now I'm going back and dealing with all these companies that have recurring payments that need to capture my card information. A lot of times it's funny. I'm like, the more sophisticated ones have an online place for me to go and securely enter that payment data. But, I always cringe when someone asks, what's your credit card number and can you give me a call to update it? Because where's that data going right now? It's like, and I find a lot of our partners, if they don't have a solution in place, that's oftentimes how they're capturing that data. They're not swiping a card face-to-face or using a chip, right? Where there's that secure transaction. They're doing a card not present transaction, and that information needs to be relayed. Another thing that people need to think about, and this is kind of tying back to one of the security concerns, what MSPs should be concerned with is as you're entering payment data, even if the system is PCI compliant that you're entering into, how are you getting that information to the system? And we talk a lot about this in the point of sale world. Just because you have PCI compliant software, what about from the swipe to getting to the software? What about from the keystroke on your keyboard to getting it into PCI compliant software? And so those are things that Connect Booster addresses as well through things like an encrypted keypad that is a unique encryption key to Connect Booster as a system. So even if there was something malicious inside of your environment, you're not giving up card data through the keystroke. It's all being encrypted from the keystroke to the software.
So Ryan, with Connect Booster, the reliance goes onto the customer side too. Does it take it away from the MSP? So if I'm an MSP and my techs are not doing it anymore, it's the customers or their clients that are entering this information?
Yes. I mean, we have the ability to accommodate both ways. So there's a lot of our partners that push people out to the portal, which is, the nature of the software. We do offer an end client portal that they can log into where they're going to be capturing that payment data. But we still allow for that ability to have our partner enter payment data on behalf of their client if they so choose. And that's where we're offering those protections around, example, an encrypted keypad service to make sure if they are going to key it in, that at least on their end, they're eliminating PCI risk.
Gotcha. So you're allowing them to customize the payment opportunity, whatever works best for the end client. Obviously, it's
absolutely
excellent. So
we want to be flexible while making that process as secure as possible in our world today.
Great. Hey, are there any other PCI compliance issues that apply to MSPs that they should be concerned with?
Well, I mean, it's a very broad stroke, right? And it's a moving target all the time. So, being involved in the payment space, anyone that accepts credit cards or is dealing with payments in some way, shape, or form has to do what's called a self-assessment questionnaire, PCI. SAQ. That's something that Connect Booster as a team helps our client out with. And there's also different levels of that questionnaire, and Connect Booster as a product drastically simplifies the questionnaire that our partners have to fill out. And again, we're here to assist with that. So what people oftentimes see as a pain point, even accepting credit card versus maybe a manual check, from their clients, and maybe they don't want to accept a credit card or electronic payments because of some of the work that's associated with it. Not only do we help them address it from a security standpoint, but also some of the things that they need to do on an annual basis to maintain their PCI compliance status. We help them out with that as well. But it's a moving target. So, it's just being mindful at all times. Do I have a good process in place to make sure, for example, when I have that data, who has access to that data? And from a Connect Booster perspective, once data is in the system, it allows our partners or the end clients to have access, but there's no clear payment data ever exposed. So it's secure.
Gotcha. Yeah, the old saying, "Hope is not a strategy." It sounds like you're helping connect the dots behind the scenes for partners, so that they can securely collect their amounts owed.
Well, I kind of have a two-part to that. Hope is not a strategy. So implementing a good process and not getting paid in cash flow is king. That's the other side of our conversation. So
certainly. So. One other question on that. So without naming names, what are some of the scariest examples of collection processes that you've seen providers using? And I don't mean to berate anybody for it, but I think in many cases I've been used as a scary example in the past, and it's a good learning experience for others to say, yeah, maybe we are doing this.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of things, and a lot of it is in the name of efficiency, and we trust our people, right? I mean, it's not something as we're hiring the right individuals, and we have good process of bringing people in on our team. Things like a printed spreadsheet or an electronically stored spreadsheet. Those are things that happen a lot if they don't have a secure encrypted data vault that's tightly integrated with the systems they use. There's all these inefficiencies that exist just because you have a secure place to a data vault. Okay, now how do we get the information out and have it integrated with the systems that we already use? And quite honestly, I've spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars in people time to get to use them efficiently, right? So oftentimes that spreadsheet is just a means of efficiency, and we trust our people, and you don't have a problem until you have a problem. And that's the issue. And when you have a problem in this space, it becomes a big problem because of all the disclosure that then needs to happen to your end client piece, right? And as much as a breach is bad, they say even the perception of an issue is just as bad as actually having the data being stolen, just because of reputation cost, right?
Certainly.
And so to think about some of the scariest examples, it's just clear text payment data sitting on a sheet. I think about even things like paper scanned emails. How many times have we been asked to send in an authorization form, or even we're asking for payment data on an authorization form at the end of our master services contract, for ACH, and where's that stuff being held and stored, and is it being faxed, is it being emailed, how's it being emailed? I mean, there's lots of different solutions out there that can help mitigate that stuff if you're doing it that way, but why not make it simple in a one-stop shop? That's my question.
Yeah, it makes sense. Those are vulnerabilities I don't think a lot of small businesses think about, let alone in the channel too. I mean, channel are busy, things are happening fast, business is growing, trying to scale the business isn't easy but those type of processes can slip through the cracks.
And that's it. And it's not like anybody's trying to be malicious or do things wrong. It's in the name of efficiency, right? But, it's as we think about things, it's, our job on our end here at Connect Booster is to help do a lot of that thought for them, and then offer a solution to say, hey, package this all up and here's a really simple solution so you don't have to worry about it anymore, and continue to grow your business.
Makes perfect sense. So how do integrations, you mentioned accounting packages, QuickBooks, and integrations, I'm assuming, with PSAs like Autotask and ConnectWise. How did those factor into payment card security?
Well, a lot of it is just where is data being stored. If you're trying to integrate systems and create efficiencies, where's the data being held? That's, in those connections and how you're bringing everything together. And so, to speak to that, even when we talk about Connect Booster, I'd say partners or prospects, a lot of times they think, okay, Connect Booster is actually holding the payment data. Even Connect Booster itself is not actually holding the payment data. We're just holding a token, and we leverage PCI compliant technology and Data Vault where, not only us, but, hundreds of other companies, rely upon data to be held secure, inside of a Data Vault. And so that's the key. It's not so much those solutions themselves. It's how do we tie it all together while being able to do what we need to do from a payments perspective and not expose any of those systems to actual payment data itself. Does that make sense?
It does. It sounds like the integrations help you automate the entire process, but everything as far as the security side is kind of locked and
exactly. Keep it out of those. Don't expose anything to that stuff. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So I've heard you mention that MSPs and MSSPs have the right to win automated cash flow. What do you mean by that?
Sure. That's a really good question, Brian. There's a number of different ways to answer that question, I guess. But that right to win, first of all, we're technology companies, right? So that right to win, shouldn't our customers expect us to be using technology to accept payments as well? Oftentimes we are offering them cutting edge solutions to hedge security issues inside of their business. And then what we're doing is we're asking for a paper check to pay for those secure strategies and secure services that we're offering them. And when we think about a check as a payment method, how does that get to me from my client? It's a piece of paper that has clear text payment information on it. Now, regulation around that's different than, credit card data, PCI compliance. But the fact of the matter remains, you have a clear text account number and a clear text routing number. And on that document, you even have the signature of the account holder or someone that's a signer on that account. And the security there is an envelope that's passing between how many hands between my client and myself. It's funny. It's kind of ridiculous. And so one of the concerns that people have a lot of times when we're implementing Connect Booster as a product is, okay, how do I get my clients to use it? Well, are you helping your end client work through a security strategy? Yeah. Well, we're no longer going to accept a very insecure payment method to get you on board with all of these strategies just to have our plan breached by this very manual payment method, right? And so it can be worked right into that security conversation on why they're going to pay you, whether it's on an automated basis or a push. They're going to do it with Connect Booster or a secure system to make those payments happen, right? That's a huge right to win as a MSSP. The other thing is, again, we're offering those security services. Recurring services is another right to win as we bill our clients for all the different things that we bill them for as a security company, whether that's email security, whether that's, hardening network infrastructure, all of that. How many things are those end clients already paying for on a recurring basis that they almost think of like a utility, right? Cell service, internet, insurances, security monitoring. I mean, even for like their home, you think about a managed, recurring fee for home security services or office security services, even from a cameras or a door breach or something like that. And you're offering that same type of service. A lot of times, people will say, well, how do I pitch this to my clients? How do I get them on board with recurring billing? And I'm like, that same person that you're worried about talking to is paying their cell service more than likely on a recurring monthly basis. And I'd have to argue the services that we're offering our client are more important than your cell phone to the core longevity of their business and making money, day to day as their VoIP provider or, these other things. And so there's a part of this that's technology, and there's a part of this that is also a mindset. We need to understand that the services we offer are valuable enough, and we can command recurring payments on recurring services. And there are hundreds of other examples and hundreds of other vendors that these people are paying for. And just because you're not a Fortune 100 or a Fortune 500 company doesn't mean that your services aren't more important than the services that those Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies are offering. And so start thinking in that same line. And, as Connect Booster, we come in and give you that Fortune 500 solution set for pennies on the dollar. And that's where that's another right to win inside of right to win that automated cash flow.
So it's a confidence issue. And from my years in the channel, working with many channel firms, I think that from the tech perspective, awesome technology professionals in the industry, but they tend to struggle
Absolutely.
in two areas, usually upgrading, selling upgraded services to existing clients because they're friends. They see them as more friends than they do as clients sometimes. And then the other part, as you mentioned, is going back in to say, I need to get paid faster than you're paying me now in many cases. That's a tough discussion for technology professionals. Overall, I mean, there's quite a few that are very good at it. But having that confidence to go in and say, this is my system, I need to automate it. It helps you, it helps us. That's the type of attitude they need to be having, is what it sounds like.
And where I think we help take that a step further and help eliminate that pain point of the conversation is that security conversation we just had as your trusted advisor for these services. How can I allow you to pay me like this? Here's what I've done, not only from hardening your system, securing your email, but also making sure our transactional relationship is rock solid and secure as well. And that's why I'm implementing this. It takes the edge off of having that conversation, right? It's just falling right in line with what they're already talking to their client about. And that's the right to win, that recurring revenue, automated cash flow.
That's a perfect time to go in. The one question I had is, when should MSSPs have that collections talk with their clients? Is it during the sales process, after they close the deal? What's the best point that you're seeing as a best practice?
Yeah, and it's during the sales process. The fact of the matter is, we are going to have a money conversation / collections conversation with every single client that we bring on board. When do you want to have that conversation? When I do face-to-face presentations for groups of people, I'll oftentimes have an example where I'll have someone stand up and I ask them to give me their wallet. I'll ask for a volunteer and I'll find someone to do it. And once I get that wallet, I start asking for a little more, like their badge at a conference or their cell phone. And, as I'm doing this, I say, hey, I'll promise I'll give you this back. It's not like I'm taking this and going to keep it forever, but I'll give you it back. And so they start basically giving me what I asked them for. And then I take it and I go to the other side of the room. I say, I'll give you this back, but you never really defined the timeline with me. So do I give it to you today? Do I give it to you in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? This ends up being their accounts receivable process. And oftentimes what we do with our clients, if we're not going to have the money conversation in the same side of the conversation that we're talking about SLAs and how we're going to implement inside of their world and the service that we're going to provide, right? And if we're not having that getting paid conversation, it's going to happen at some point. And do you want to do it when you've already laid your wallet out on the table for the client and they've had it and they promised to pay you back, and hopefully they do, but you didn't really set the terms well and you didn't establish that up front? You can uncover a lot of red flags. inside of the sales process if people get very uncomfortable for wanting to pay for recurring service. And I'm not saying it's a line in the sand where it's 100% all the time. There are exceptions to every rule, but we should have 90+% of our recurring automated services that we provide coming in on a recurring automated basis. And by definition, recurring revenue means you do work one time and get paid over and over and over again. That's recurring, right? That's the definition of something recurring. Well, just because you offer a service and send out an invoice, that's not, if you're manually having to do things, that's not recurring revenue. That's just revenue you're chasing. That's not the definition. Let's take our recurring revenue and turn it into the true definition of recurring revenue. Do work once, get paid over and over again.
Certainly. So it sounds like it's having not just the confidence, but having the discussion of setting proper expectations for new clients coming on and having the discussions with existing clients to let them know, here's the SLAs, here's the deliverables, here's the timeline for each thing that needs to happen, and kind of sticking to it.
That's exactly it.
Which is never really easy sometimes, but it's those tough conversations they need to have.
And you will have a money conversation. Do you want to have it up front when they're most excited to be on board and working with you because you're in the process of closing the sale? Or do you want to do it after you have your money invested either in services or hardware, or you've rolled a truck, or you have technicians and you have time invested? When do you want to have the money conversation? Because it will happen. It has to happen. When do you want it to happen? There's no getting out of it.
Exactly. So before we close, Ryan, any final thoughts to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that we talked about today aren't even necessarily product related, as Connect Booster. I think they're just best practices inside of the business. And there are a lot of other tools out there that you can use, pieces and parts and different tools to put together a system to accomplish a lot of these, let alone things like the when are we going to have a money conversation, right? That you don't need a tool to start that as a best practice. The thing that we do in Connect Booster is we are a solution that's created by a technology company for technology companies. And our roadmap is now defined by over 1,000 partners because they're giving us feedback on what they need, right? And so it's really the best of both worlds, not only for our partners, but also for us in our development roadmap. And so existing partners that are listening to us, we welcome your feedback. We love it. Prospective partners that are looking at shoring up some of these issues inside of their businesses, I'd encourage them to have a conversation, no strings attached, but, let's talk about your current situation and where you're at and how Connect Booster can help, whether it's from a technology perspective, where Connect Booster is a solution for you, or purely from here's a couple things that you should start doing right away, whether you're using us or not, to help mitigate some risk inside of your world and your client's world. We're happy to do both.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. So I'd like to thank Ryan Goodman from Connect Booster for sharing his expertise in secure payments and collections with us today. And on behalf of IoTSSA, I'd also like to thank you for listening and encourage you to check out all the great channel cybersecurity content on the association's website. Go to IoTSSA.com and have a phenomenal day.